Oh, I guess it is working. Huh. Kind of worried that, because it wasn't loading on my YouTube feed, so we'll see how this goes now. Um, Especially since no one's actually alive. But I think I've solved the issue that we had last time with the mic. Oh. I think we're set to go. All right. So in this first episode of the series on liturgics, I thought we would discuss the daily cycle because it's kind of it's the smallest cog in the liturgical machine that that we follow. So we have, to break it down, we have a number of, if you want to understand the liturgical cycles, then you want to think about different cogs that are kind of all on the same pin, and they all rotate at their appropriate speed, and depending on kind of how they all line up together, you get this, specific printout, so to speak, of the rubrics for the day. The rubrics rubrics is the term used for uh, the specific hymns and psalms and prayers that are said during a specific service for that day, again, depending on how all the cogs kind of line up. So you have you have a number of these different cogs. The kind of the daily cog is what we're going to cover today, and so that's a cycle of 8 services, 9 we'll kind of see, but it's easiest to remember 8. That every single day throughout the year, they're supposed to be served, or they are served, right? And they never change. Well, actually, that's not totally true, but in general, they very rarely change, and we'll get into some of the nuances there. But it's kind of the foundation of all the rest of the structures, or the structure into which the rest of the cogs kind of put their parts into. I hope that this is going to be an articulate explanation of the the liturgical calendars. Anyway, the next cog you have is the weekly cog, and it's what's called the octoekos, or the 8 tones. Octoekos in Greek is the 8 and tones, literally the 8 tones. So that is a book that has the 8 tones that we cycle through each week. We beginning from Pascha, but from Pentecost, we begin with tone 1, and each week we go through and we go tone 1, tone 2, tone 3, tone 4, all the way through to tone 8, and then we start over again. So that's the weekly cog, and you have for each day of the week the most important part of that octoekos. I hope that's appropriate to say. Someone's going to hate me for saying that. The most important part of the octoekos is the Sunday hymns, but that's kind of what they focus on. And then each day of the week for each tone, you also have hymns that follow the events that are commemorated, or the saints that are commemorated for each day of the week. So on Mondays, we commemorate the angels, the angelic hosts. Tuesday, put me on the spot, did you? I don't remember what Tuesday is actually. Wednesday we commemorate the betrayal of Christ. Thursday is the apostles and Saint Nicholas. Friday is the crucifixion, and Saturday the departed. And then Sunday, of course, the resurrection. So for each of those days, you have hymns from the octoekos that can be, or sometimes are placed into the service for that specific day, or that time of the day. And then you have the Millennian calendar, which is the non-movable calendar. What's called the non-movable calendar. It's a feast day. Well, so we just had Nativity and Theophany. They're part of the Millennian calendar because they always land on the 25th of December, Gregorian or Julian calendar. Both. It's always on the December 25th, and Theophany on January 6th. And then for each of the days of the year, you have the feasts, or the events that are commemorated, that are associated with those days in the Millennian calendar. And then the final cog is the Paschalia, which is the calendar that is based off of Pascha, how Pascha is calculated each year. And then you have the cycle that's connected with the daily readings that is connected with the Paschalia, and that's all based off of when Pascha lands, the first week after Pascha, the second week, third week, fourth week, fifth week after Pascha, and then you get to Pentecost, and then everything is based after Pentecost off of Pentecost. So you get the first week after Pentecost, the second week after Pentecost, the first Monday after Pentecost, the 52nd Monday off of Pentecost. And that cycle moves based, of course, off of Pascha when it lands for each year. This year we have a very early Pascha. And so that cycle actually expands, or it's fully served, you could say, because we have, well, it will be fully served depending on, I do believe next year, in 2027, Pascha will be a late, it'll be late. So because this year it's early and next year it's late, the Paschalia is served, fully. There's like 58 weeks or however many weeks are in it. Whereas since last year was a fairly late, reasonably late Pascha, and this year it's so early, we actually don't go through that full cycle, right? So that's kind of a little bit of the nuance with the Paschalia, the movable calendar. And so the feasts that are connected with that are, of course, the beginning of Great Lent is the beginning of the Paschalia, of course, and we start with the preparation Sundays, of course, which is going to be next Sunday. This coming Sunday we have Zacchaeus Sunday, which it's actually the final week or the final Sunday of the outgoing Paschalia. It's actually not part of the new year, so to speak, or the new Paschalia cycle. It's not in the it's not the first Sunday of the Typicon, or not, sorry, the Typicon, the Triodian, and then so the first Sunday is the publican and the Pharisee, then the prodigal son. Let's see, prodigal son. Last Judgment, and then the casting out of paradise. So we have these, let me see, did somebody text me about my stream? Nope, I just wanted to make sure everything's going okay. You can write comments, whoever's, oh, I had one concurrent viewer and then they left. So anyway, we begin this movable cycle with the preparation Sundays for Lent, and then we go through Lent, the Lenten Triodian. We get to Holy Week, and then Pascha, and then everything after Pascha to Pentecost and on, up until the next Zacchaeus Sunday. So that's kind of an short, unarticulate overview of the liturgical cycles and calendars. So now we'll get to what we're actually covering for today, which is the daily cycle. As I said, we have here my nice graph that I made, and it has on the left it has the list of services that are part of the daily cycle, and then on the right you have a graph showing the hours as they're compared to our daily time calculations. So of course, early in the church's life, as you can see here, we have I suppose on the right it's in Russian. So anyway, in the bottom left we have 1, right? You can see the 1. So that's the first hour. And then the next is 3rd hour, 6th hour, 9th hour. And those, of course, were based off of the ancient way of calculating hours, which began with the rising of the sun. So the first hour of the day was more or less 6 o'clock in the morning, and that first hour would be from 6 until 9 o'clock. 9 until noon is the 3rd hour. These were also associated with the watches, as in watch like guards having their watch. And then from noon till 3 of 6th hour, from 3 till 6, 9th hour, and Vespers after. Then you have Compline, midnight office, and then matins in the bottom right. Bottom right, not the right bottom. So, as you can see, we can kind of divide these 8 services into two sections. We have 4 hours, and then we have 4 other services. And the hours are all served consecutively, and then you have the other 4 services. So I've listed them here in order of which, let me see here. Yeah, okay, so I've listed them in order of the way they're generally served in modern practice, but the Vespers, as you can see, is in green, which indicates it's the Vespers is the first service of the new day, right? So we have actually at Vouchsafe, O Lord, specifically, is when we have the new day. We transition to the next liturgical day. And so that's actually, you'll see this upcoming here on Forgiveness Sunday during Vespers, if it's, if your priest follows kind of the liturgical structure, then the priest should be wearing his gold vestments for Sunday up until Vouchsafe, O Lord, during Vespers. You don't start Forgiveness Vespers in black already, the Lenten, vestment color. You're supposed to start it in gold because you're still in the liturgical day of Sunday, and then at Vouchsafe, O Lord, you transition and change into the black vestments because you've transitioned already into the liturgical day of Monday, the first day of Lent. And then we have Compline, Midnight Office, which is sometimes called Nocturnes. We have Matins, first hour, third hour, sixth hour, and Divine Liturgy. 1 second. Наверху. Okay, had my daughter come in there for a second. Divine Liturgy's in parentheses there because it kind of, it complicates the nice 8-part structure that you get to divide in half. But Divine Liturgy is also part of the daily cycle of services. I know in the recent, past century, it's kind of, you have this liturgical revival and all this theology about liturgics and whatnot, and people talked about liturgy being, the service beyond time, and it's not part of the cycle of services. But I think that that's actually been a negative kind of aspect of this, liturgical revival, being that the liturgy was actually has been now disconnected from the daily cycle of services, in which case many people serve liturgy without serving the other services that are part of the daily cycle. And so it's not historically accurate at all. Liturgy was always part of the daily cycle of services, and you can tell that because there's this book that is called the Typikon, which is what the book that regulates the services. It's basically a big book. Oh, here I can show you. I have a nice copy here in. Oh, it's gonna take. All right, so I have this nice copy of a Slavonic Typikon from 1903, I think, actually. Let's see. It's not in the best condition. 1906. So this big book here is the rubrics. Basically, it begins and tells you all of how you're supposed to serve the services. It regulates when you serve them, how you serve them, and all that. And it actually has all of these cycles that we talked about. So it has the daily cycle, it has the weekly cycle, it has the Menaian calendar, the monthly cycle, or the yearly cycle, the non-movable cycle, and then also the Paschalia. So, as I said, liturgy really is part of the daily cycle of services because it's regulated by the Typikon. There are days when it's prescribed to be served, and there's days when it's not prescribed to be served. Most of those days are, of course, in Great Lent. During the week, we don't serve Divine Liturgy. We only have the Presanctified Liturgy, which many people, or in Russian, oftentimes it's called Vespers with the order of communion, because you're actually not celebrating the liturgy. It's just Vespers with the service of receiving communion. But of course, in our tradition, it's called the liturgy of the presanctified gifts, and so I don't think anyone has any issue with calling it a liturgy. But back to the point, also, we just had it, for those that are on the Julian calendar this year, on Friday, last week, the Friday before Theophany, we served royal hours because Theophany landed on a Monday this year. And so the services shift around. If Theophany or Nativity land on a Sunday or a Monday, you serve the royal hours on Friday. And it's not prescribed to have liturgy on Friday when you serve the royal hours. So it's just all this to just underline and illustrate the point that actually Divine Liturgy is part of the daily cycle of services. And we'll get into the kind of the modern practice of how they're served. Of course, going back to what we talked about, the hours as they were associated in the ancient world, when this, this typikon, this kind of structure, these rubrics were developed, mostly in the 4th century, there's the typikon that I just showed you is the Jerusalem typikon, which has its origin in the typikon or the rule of Saint Saba, who was a Palestinian monk, or a monk that lived in Palestine, just not too far from Bethlehem. I had the honor and or the blessing of going and being at Saint Saba's monastery for his feast day back in, what was it, 2022, I believe, December 18th, 2022. So it's a very ancient rule. This all of these liturgical structures, of course, they weren't exactly in this form back in the 4th century, but they, you can see the structure of our services already back then, and even earlier in the 1st and 2nd centuries, there's elements that were preserved and taken and then developed on, and very quickly it did take on the structure and the elements that we have today. So our structure of services is it is genuinely going on 2 millennia that of us serving these specific services in this order, if we follow them and we don't shorten them and whatnot, as best as we can, to the best of our strength and abilities and conditions. In any case, the hours back originally were served individually. First hour being at at 6 o'clock in the morning, third hour at 9, 6th hour at noon, 9th hour at 3, Vespers at 6, Compline at 9, or in these, probably not exactly at these times, but in these, as you can see, kind of you had 3 hours, right, that were part of the first hour, and so sometime during that period, that was served. And you have Compline, midnight office, and matins. But very quickly they were kind of grouped together into 3 groups. You have, let's see, you have midnight, or you have 9th hour, Vespers, and Compline. You have midnight office, matins, and first hour, and then you would have 3rd hour, 6th hour, and divine liturgy. And that's associated with there are a number of scriptural verses that speak about that. There's Psalm 54:18. I believe this is the Septuagint numbering, where it's evening, morning, and noonday. What is it? I have it here in Slavonic. What is it in English? Give me just a second. Evening and morning and at noon I will pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. And then there's also, let's see here, there's another scriptural verse. It also has this three times in the day. Noonday, yeah, so, and then, it's during the, let's see, it's said in Daniel, also the book of Daniel, that he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. So, and then also in the prayer of the entrance during Vespers, we say, evening, morning, and noonday, we praise, we bless, we give thanks, and we pray unto thee, O Master of all. That was my translation from the Slavonic on the fly. So if that's not exactly what it is in your English version, then that's why. But anyway, we have this three very quickly, we have this development of the services being grouped into three parts of the day. You had the morning, the midday, or early evening, and then the night service. And as I said, we have the first group being ninth hour, which is the final service of the outgoing day, and then Vespers, which begins the new day, liturgical day, and Compline, and then we have midnight office, Matins first hour, and then third hour, sixth hour, and divine liturgy. Now, in our let's see here. There we go. In the modern practice, there's kind of two practices. There's the Slavic practice and then the Greek practice. Now, in the Slavic practice, in the parish practice, we have actually in both practices. There's now only two of these, daytime services that are observed. Right, you have a morning service and an evening service. And the evening service in the Greek tradition, Antiochian tradition as well. So the Antiochian Church is part of the Greek. It's officially called the Antiochian Greek Orthodox Church or the Greek Orthodox Church of Antioch. So the Greek churches serve Vespers, Great Vespers, or Little Vespers, or daily Vespers in the evening. And then in the morning they serve orthros, or Matins, and liturgy. In the Slavic tradition, you serve Vespers and Matins in the evening together, and in the morning you serve third hour, sixth hour, and divine liturgy. So in the Slavic practice, you do see more of you see what is the word? We see more of we preserve more of the daily cycle of the services than in the Greek practice, because although we're serving Matins, which is supposed to be served in the middle of the night, about 3 a.m. is when you're supposed to begin Matins. People will say it's silly to serve Matins in the evening. You're saying prayers for the next morning, about the sun rising, and it's, the sun sometimes hasn't even set. But I think that that's a little bit of a superficial and a kind of silly way of looking at it. There's plenty of precedent of preparation or of moving things forward to prepare ahead of time rather than observing the prayers after the time that they're prescribed. So I'm not trying to say that the Slavic practice, of course, is any better than the Greek practice, but I don't think it's any less, if we can say that. So let's see, is anyone watching? I have one viewer. Thank you for viewing. No comments yet. So, let's see here. Yes, the Slavic practice. Actually, it's interesting because even these practices, I do believe, are actually fairly recent. Within the last 200 years at least, they kind of developed to have, to separate the services the way they are now. If you read in the life of St. John of Kronstadt, he would start Matins. He's a married priest, right? Just a parish priest. He would begin Matins at 4 a.m. and serve Matins without cutting anything. And then as soon as they finished Matins and third and sixth hour, they would go into divine liturgy. And so it's historically speaking, as far as I understand, as I have done my research, which isn't that much, but it's best as I can. It was fairly common to actually keep the coalescence, I think that's the word I wanted, of the daily cycle of services whole. So there wasn't really much that was skipped, that like we do nowadays, right? Of course, looking at our chart here, most parishes never serve ninth hour, never serve Compline except out, in the context of Great Lent. We'll come back to that. Midnight office, probably the only time in most parishes it's served is, or nocturnes, is the service right before the Paschal Vigil begins, when the Plascenica or the Epitaphion is brought into the altar. Matins is really one of the only services that's still preserved, but it's often cut down to a very, very skin and bones version. Many of the kathismas and the canon is often cut down and shortened. Um, First hour also is extremely rarely served, except for, I do believe RoCor parishes do still keep the first hour, connected with matins as it's prescribed to be served. And then in OCA churches and RoCor, other Slavic church, Bulgarian church, I believe. Well, I actually don't know about the Bulgarian or the Serbians, but they well may also serve third and sixth hour in the morning before Divine Liturgy if they serve matins in the evening. But in the OCA and the RoCor, generally the practice is to serve third and sixth hour before Divine Liturgy. In the Greek practice, as far as I know, third and sixth hour almost all also never served. Now, maybe I'm wrong, so please correct me in the comments. But that's a little bit of going into the divine or the daily cycle of services. Now we have a little chart here I wanted on the right or the left, we still have our chart as they're served, right, in their kind of order of from the last service ending the outgoing liturgical day, which is supposed to be connected with Vespers, which begins the next liturgical day. So you end have the final service where and the reason is in the ninth hour you have the Triperia or the Triperion and the Kontakion for that day that are read or sung. Generally they're read though. And then in Vespers already you have the Triperion for the next day at the end of Vespers that's read or sung. So, and of course the Stichira, yeah, that are sung for the coming day. So on the right here, though, I've divided it just to be able to remember kind of the services into the the two groups of 4 services. You have first, third, sixth, and ninth hour, and then you have Vespers, Compline, Midnight Office, and Matins. In the top group, you kind of have 2 evening services, right? Vespers, which is early afternoon or late afternoon, generally about 3 or 4 that it's supposed to be served, and Compline about 6. But oftentimes, as I said, they are connected together. You have ninth hour Vespers and Matin, or ninth hour Vespers in Compline, and then Matins or midnight office, midnight, right? Supposed to be served at midnight, and then oftentimes or not oftentimes, it's prescribed to go right into matins, in many cases, and then right into first hour. And in most of the Orologions, right, the book of hours, which have all of these services in it, you can actually tell that, for example, third and sixth hour are always served together, and ninth hour is always served with Vespers, and first hour always comes after matins because of the way they begin. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so if you open up the Orologion and you flip to sixth hour, there is no Trisagian prayers there. It immediately begins with "O come, let us worship God our King," right? Which is it's right after the Trisagian prayers, and then you go into the Psalms for that hour. The same is true with ninth hour, right? You have ninth hour and then Vespers. If you open up Vespers, sometimes they'll have it because it's so uncommon to serve ninth hour. Sometimes they'll have the Trisagian prayers at the beginning of Vespers, but a very traditional Orologian will not have the Trisagian prayers at the beginning of Vespers, because you always go ninth hour right into Vespers, and you begin with "O come, let us worship God our King," and then first hour again. There's no Trisagian prayers at the beginning of it, because you end matins with the Polychronion for the what are they called? The bishops, I guess, the hierarchs of your church, and the primate of the church, and your local bishop, and then you go right into "O come, let us worship God our King." So just even in the Orologian, you can see that these services are connected together. They're supposed to be served together as the full kind of part, or the full cycle of the daily cycle. So let's see here. What else? As I wanted to mention, so yeah, Compline, as I said, Compline is oftentimes in parishes only served during, um, during um, Great Lent. During the first week of Great Lent, we have the Great Canon of St. Andrew, the Great Canon of Repentance, and so that is always connected, or it should be always connected with Compline during the first week, and then in the fifth week, when you read the entire Canon of St. Andrew, because in the first week it's divided into 4 parts. When you read the entire Canon of St. Andrew in the fifth week, it's part of Matins. So it's seated. They're seated in this, right? Like I said, so you have these parts of the hymnography that are then seated or placed into the changeable parts, the variable parts of each of these daily services. And we can go over those variable parts here. That's probably a helpful part to go over as well. So, but Compline, in some practices, at the church where I serve, we serve Compline during Great Lent on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the evening for the pre-sanctified liturgy for the next day. So, but generally outside of Lent, the only other time that you'll see it in a parish church is on the eve of Nativity and the eve of Theophany. Or rather, I'm sorry, for the actual feast day. It's, you serve the Vesperal liturgy in the morning. It's supposed to be it's not supposed to be in the morning, actually. It's supposed to be in the afternoon because it's Vespers. But oftentimes it is served in the morning. And in the evening, you'll serve Great Compline, which goes into a litia, which has special stichira for those feasts, Nativity and Theophany. And then you go right into Matins. So that's one other place that you might see. Oh, excellent! Thank you, Patricia. I see your comment. I will answer that in just a second. Whether monasteries keep the full daily cycle of services. And then midnight office is, as I said already, oftentimes nocturnes, as it's also called. Just like Matins has kind of 2 names for it, 2 different traditions. So you have Matins and Orthros. Nocturnes of midnight office. The only time that you'll really see it in a parish church is on right before the Paschal Vigil begins or the Paschal Matins begin. You say the nocturne service, which is actually a abbreviated midnight office. It's very short, it has very little of the actual midnight office in it. It's just basically the Trisagion prayers, a psalm, and then the canon for the resurrection. Stunningly beautiful canon, and then you take the epitaphion into the altar, and you begin Matins for Pascha. So just going over quickly the variable parts of each of these services. In the hours, the only things that are variable will be the Traperia and the Contachia. Everything else is going to be the same, except when it's royal hours. And you have royal hours 3 times in the year. You have it for Nativity, for Theophany, and for Holy Friday. And again, on those days, liturgy is not prescribed. Now that I'm thinking about it, I even if the Annunciation lands on Holy Friday, I believe you don't serve liturgy. But I might be wrong about that. I'd have to look up in the Typicon, which everyone should. Well, it's not translated into English actually, so that's very unfortunate because in that sense, a lot of the liturgical variants in America might be explained just by that. So. Get off on these rabbit trails, these bunny trails, and I forget what I was talking about. Oh, the variable parts. Okay, for royal hours, the psalms that are read at the very beginning are changed to different other psalms that are associated with the specific feast. Right. So for Nativity, you have specific psalms for each of the hours that are read. There's 3 psalms at the beginning of each hour. those psalms will be associated with Nativity or with Theophany or with the crucifixion and the burial and the resurrection of Christ during Holy Friday. And then you also have stichira, some troperia that are sung. You have an epistle and a gospel reading also. That's why they're called royal hours. And historically, that's because for those days, there was no liturgy that was prescribed. But when the emperor would come, they wanted something. This is kind of the simplified version of it, right? But the emperor wanted something more regal, and so they had these other elements that were added into it. That's of course the historical Darwinian, if you want to call it that, presentation of liturgical development. But anyway, in Vespers, there's quite a bit more that's variable. You have the stichira for the day, and the stichira for both the Lord I call verses and for the apostica, and also the litia, if a litia is prescribed for that day. And then we have the troperia, of course. The Perkimenon changes during Vespers for each day, but it's based off of the day of the week, not based off of the Meneian or the services that are for that day. I really hope this is making sense. I might be assuming that people understand more than they do. Patricia, let me know if or Patricius. I'm sorry, not Patricia. Patricius. I apologize. Let me know if any of this makes sense. And then Compline and Midnight Office, there's also very little that is variable. Matins is kind of the really core of the daily cycle of service. It's the longest service of the daily cycle, and its core element is the canon, which changes for each day of the week. Depending on also the octoekos, that weekly cycle that I talked about, based on the 8 tones, and then also for the Meneian or the Paschalia calendar, depending on what feast day or what saint is commemorated for that day. Okay. All right. Excellent. I like that thumbs up. Okay, so do monasteries keep the full daily cycle of services? Generally, no, in my experience. I do believe there are a few monasteries that do. I believe on Mount Athos. I've never been to Mount Athos, unfortunately. I would love to go one day. But to my understanding on Mount Athos, the daily cycle of services is kept as it's prescribed. In the monastery of St. Sabas, there was quite a few elements that I noticed that were sort of specifically prescribed in the Typicon that nobody follows, and so that I do believe that like the monastery of Saint Saba, quite a bit of the daily cycle is followed fairly rigorously according to the Typicon. It's also the place where the Typicon itself was founded, that we have, as I said, the Jerusalem Typicon has its origins in the monastery or in the rule of Saint Saba in that monastery. And then I do believe St. Anthony's in Arizona also follows. I've never been there either, actually, but I do believe they follow the rubrics fairly closely as well. I know at least that they do matins in the middle of the night. So so I studied at St. Sergius Lavra in Moscow, or outside of Moscow, and at the monastery there they don't follow the full daily cycle of services. They do. So they'll do 9th hour and Vespers. They don't do Compline. Generally, during Lent they'll do Compline a lot, but unless it's a simple service, it depends on what service it is, right? And I know they've changed a little bit since the new hegumen there has been there. But when I was studying there, generally they would just do Vespers, go right into Matins, and then and first hour. And if it was a simple service, then they would do 9th hour, Vespers, Matins, first hour. And in the morning, they would do 3rd and 6th hour and liturgy. So they do follow it fairly closely, but not most monasteries don't follow it, fully. I think that's going to be it for this episode, this first thing in the series. There's my last slide I forgot to put in there. I think we'll talk about the different ranks of the services. There's 6 ranks of service this is mostly relevant for the Millennian and the Paschal calendar. More so for the Millennian, actually. But just to kind of underline again here, we have these 8 services of the daily cycle, but really liturgy is in there after 6th hour, before 9th hour. So liturgy is in a certain sense, it's not a certain sense, it is the culmination of the daily cycle of services. You have all of the services that lead up to liturgy, which also has variable portions of the service for that day in it, right? Most of it is consistent. The antiphons, you'll either have the daily antiphons or the, what are they called? The изобразительные антифоны. So they're not the typica antiphons, but those are the ones that are generally served because for most of the liturgies on Sundays, they're generally sung. And that's, the Bless the Lord, O my soul. The second one starts with Praise the Lord, O my soul. And then the third antiphon is almost always the Beatitudes. The daily antiphons are, I can't remember the words. They're very, in the Slavic practice, they're very rarely sung. And then you also have festal antiphons that are served for the major feast days. Generally, the major feast days of the Lord. So for Nativity and for Theophany, we had festal antiphons at the beginning of liturgy, and for Pascha, you have the entire Bright Week that you have the festal antiphons. For Palm Sunday, I do believe you have festal antiphons as well. And then after that, you go into the entrance, the Trisagia, or the Triperia, which are also a variable portion of the liturgy. And then the Trisagion. Sometimes instead of the Trisagion, you have it's generally, or it's it's sung for baptisms. What is it? As many as are baptized into Christ, I put on Christ. After that, you have the epistle and the gospel readings, which again are variable portions of the service, depending on the day and the feast. And then you have litanies. You have the great entrance. More or less after the gospel, everything, nothing is really variable. It's all pretty consistent, with a few exceptions. So, not to cause too much confusion. I can't tell if the stream is, I think the stream was really lagging, so I apologize about that. I appreciate Patricios F tuning in. Please like and subscribe and share. We have some exciting projects coming up. Each year for Lent, for the last 3 years, we've been publishing. I keep hiding behind my nice image there. Anyway, the last 3 years for Lent, or this will be the 3rd year that we each day of Great Lent will be publishing a homily of Saint Innocent of Kherson, who was called the Golden Tongue, the Chrysostomos of Russia. He was an 18th century or 19th century bishop who has stunning homilies. And so for not actually every day, but for many days, the entire first week, for all the Saturdays and Sundays, for Wednesdays and Fridays, there's homilies that we'll be publishing for each day for those days. And for Holy Week, we have some exciting news about that project coming up. And so, yeah, please subscribe and like, share around with your friends, and I'll catch you next time. I will try to be doing a live stream tomorrow about another topic. So we'll